Well, welcome everybody. I think we can probably go ahead and get started. Excellent. All right. So, code golf, right? Like it's the zen of writing bad code, right? So, code golf. I think a couple years back, there's a website that was like a code.golf, and I'll pull up here on a slide that they added PowerShell as an option. They can go in like do these little like small challenges, right? Like it's just this recreational puzzle game of here's a simple challenge. How few characters can you solve it in? So the problems themselves, I mean, they range in difficulty. They got plenty of them. They're very basic. I need like a couple loops and a couple of conditionals. And now how do we really shrink that down to the shortest possible source code to solve the problem? And so like, why code golf, right? It's like, we're all, we've been working with PowerShell for so long, and in production, you're writing this more, verbose, pretty code. And code golf lets you like use that skill set, knowledge, in just a really different way. So it's like you have all this familiarity with the language that you can, bring to different challenges, and then it lets you work those problem-solving, puzzling skills. And it's good for like future job interviews because they're like, tossing out code challenges anymore once they say, yeah, I write a lot of PowerShell. And then you kind of learn some really clever ways to abuse PowerShell. Like we're going to see some really dirty stuff in here. And it'll be a lot of fun. So code.golf was the site I mentioned. At one point, I was like the leader on this problem. I'm sure problem here, we're going to go through our problem step by step. And I think on Sunday, like I was tied at first, and as I was working on the talk, I found like 2 more little gems that let me bounce ahead just a little bit, just for a day or two until people noticed and caught up. But they got like 70 some holes. They got lots of languages. So if you're also doing like Python or Java, JavaScript, they got a large collection of languages for the various problems. And just because you can do something doesn't mean you should, right? Like, like being professional in your role is like writing clean code that's easy to maintain and support and troubleshoots and debug. Like you'll spend 10 times as much time reading code as you will writing it, right? So write clean code for your future self, but this is none of those things. All right, let's look at some code. So I suppose some light housekeeping. I'm doing some like inline notation what the output looks like, just so I can show like several examples in a row. So I might have several things that says, yeah, when I run get date, you'll see this string, 1 plus 2, like the value 3. And then quite often I'll like just label like the number of characters there are in a line, just as it kind of compares, which like shrinking our characters down more and more. So a couple things for like working with code golf is that we want to print output, right? You can either do like write host or just write output, just to get the output for the comparisons and checks. Or you just put your string in the pipeline and output it. Like anything that falls the pipeline that will render will be counted as your answers, your output when they're being checked. And then if you're doing a problem that they're going to give you some arguments, like, oh yeah, here's going to be like 5 things to process. In code.golf, they're going to be given to you in like the $args. And the best thing to do is just pipe that and loop through it to process each one. And then don't forget, when you're working with Unicode characters, you can just copy and paste them into your PowerShell. There's a couple challenges that kind of do some weird stuff with Unicode, and I just found, I'll just copy and paste these things around right from the examples. Makes them easier to work with. So I suppose the biggest tip with PowerShell is there's a lot of white space that's optional, way more than I ever realized before I started doing these talks. So, we can have lots of extra white space if we wanted, but to trim it off, we can do a lot of stuff like in a single line where there's like no spaces required to have some of these statements. Math operators, same way, right? We can just scrunch them all together. It gets kind of ugly with variables, but it still works. it gets more fun. Let's see if we do pipeline. Actually, this one, like we're quite familiar with the for each object loop, right? So quite often, some of our simple tricks do kind of carry over quite well. So the for each alias is a nice tight solution here. So use the aliases where you can. But there are some clever things you can do with your script blocks. Like if you happen to have your script block in a variable, you can actually do a for each on the variable because this first parameter is a script block. And we'll find a clever way to use this later. Comparison operators, like the spaces on either side, so you can actually like run these things right up next to each other. So 5 equal EQ 5, PowerShell will actually parse the equal sign out of that and see those as separate things. So when I run that, it's saying, yeah, this is perfectly valid PowerShell, and we don't need those spaces. And it's okay if the variables. Every once in a while, you'll see a case where like, oh, I've got a variable, and the next character is a valid character for a variable name. You'll have to put a space in there. But sometimes you like rearrange things to like shift where that space needs to or not need to be. And man, you can chain these things like to your heart's content. So you can do 1 and 5, and just stack those things together. Now there's some other ways we can use comparisons too. So sometimes if I'm checking, is this value equal to 5? Maybe I just need to know just when it's equal to 5 or not equal to 5. And you can sometimes like subtract 5 from a value to get 0. 0 is falsy in PowerShell. So quite often you can get a value to be true or false, 1 or 0 or not 0. You can use that in your if statements and comparisons. So like here's a case where if is a not equal to 5 is false. If I take a minus 5 and it happens to be 5, I get 0. In both cases, I kind of get the false value. Many times you might have to like inverse your operation, like it's true in this condition. Because I do it this way, I'm getting the opposite, so I gotta like flip your expressions around. But I find myself flipping expressions around all the time as I'm working through these challenges. Some more clever fun ones, like the join operator. Like I didn't realize I could just, that guy doesn't need spaces either. In fact, I can even reverse the join. I can actually put on the other side the array. So if I just do just join on the array, it will actually join all of those numbers right together for me. And then of course, if you put an array in a string, you'll just get the value spaced out. All these same rules apply to the split operator. So if I'm splitting on a value, there might be times where, for the sake of my logic, if I can like use a 0 as a delimiter, I don't need to put quotes around it when I'm splitting on it as a way to like save 2 more characters. Again, you can flip it, but and then replace. This was the fun gem. If you actually don't put something you're going to replace it with, it's actually become a remove. So you can actually do replace in a character and actually just, I'll just get rid of it for you. Don't worry about putting a blank in there for me to, not insert it. Replaces can be chained. And then arrays of strings. Like sometimes you'll need arrays of strings in various different ways to manipulate them. We can inline them. The array operator itself is optional. And if we use like write output, I don't even need the quotes, right? Because this actually becomes 3 string parameters for write output, and the value it gives me is an array. It's the collection, effectively. And there's a nice fun alias we can use, which is echo. And this is what I actually use on the terminal all the time. Like I've got these values, I'll type echo and just type out the things, and I can get the value back into a list I can work with. Often when I'm like copying and pasting from something else, I just happen to have these values spaced out. And then larger strings, right? We can use split strings to kind of like save some of those quotes. You choose your delimiters to make that easier or harder. And of course, we've here strings, right? We're gonna have like multi-line strings. This is another fun one I didn't realize till I started down the path of this talk was that strings are actually multi-line by default. Like that's a valid string with the new lines in there. It breaks really easy, but that is, yeah, like if I run this here, I get nice, the output of the first, second, third. In code, like I said, I never want to see this in production, right? Don't be doing this in your production scripts because it doesn't take much for somebody, to break that. And like, at least the here string is nice and, oh, this is intentional, right? We know they didn't accidentally put a return line in there. It's supposed to be multi-line. What's also nice about like using that hack is that I save characters as well on the new line. Like the here string, at least you gotta have your like new line after the end to close it cleanly. Actually, is that right? Sorry, I say something I'm like, this is gonna break, isn't it? Yep, okay. It's okay to be a scientist with this stuff. Like, there's so many times where I'm like, does this really work the way I think it does? And most of the time it does. Sometimes it doesn't. So then multi-line strings, you can split in the new line. If you need arrays of a certain size, right? Like if I just need a certain size, I can just say, oh, give me the numbers 1 through 20, and all the values 1 through 20. It's about a 20, item size array. If I need it to be full of zeros, I can actually make an array of 1 with a 0 in it, and if you take that times 20, I will actually get a collection of 20 zeros. And there's different notations here. Like if I actually do comma in a number, like this is a short, probably about one of the shortest ways to actually define. It tells, yeah, this is array, and or a collection, and then the multiplication operator recognizes it as such. Let's see here, variable fun. Okay. Deconstruction. This is something I believe Python has this. It's not really used as often in PowerShell, but you can assign two multiple variables. Like if I got a collection of 2 items or 2 values, I can assign them to 2 separate variables in one line. So what's beautiful about it, so like first gets A, second gets B. One clever way to use it is like when you're like splitting on an email address, right? I can actually like take my email, split on the @ sign, and assign it to the user portion and the domain portion. Like this is one of those hacks I use on the terminal and the shell all the time to, grab these quick values. And then the rules are like if you have more values than would fit into the number of variables you're assigning them to, the extras, so the first variable will get the first item, the second variable will get everything else. So in this sample here, the rest will actually have the 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, where one will just have first will have the 1 value. And then if you ever need to like assign null in the fewest characters as possible, right? Recognize that like every time in the code golf site when it runs, you get a fresh session each time. So an undefined variable is also a null. So here, like if z is not defined as anything, I can get a to be a null value, or when it starts, a will start out as null. But maybe you're in a loop and you kind of need to reset it. Another way we can accomplish this is if you're already assigning a variable to something else, and you also need a null. Well, I can just slip in the second variable here, and since there's no value after the a, the null actually gets assigned to second. So, like that's what. So I'm like saving, right? Like what, a new line and a couple characters just by putting it in line. You can also swap variables, right? So if I have so instead of like shoving stuff into a temp variable and assigning one to the other and juggling through these, you can actually assign the second to the first and the first to the second in one line to swap which variable holds which value. I think there's like a Fibonacci challenge in there that makes clever, that using this can save quite a few characters in the algorithm. All right. We can chain assignments. So if you have if you need everything to be C, we can just assign it right down the stack. And this one has come in handy a lot in the code golf challenges. Is that normally when you assign a variable when you assign a value to a variable, you don't get any output on the terminal. But if you put the parentheses around it, it'll do the assignment and also give you the value back. That's useful if you're in the middle of operations. You can do the calculation, save part of it to a variable in a larger calculation that's working through different operations. Adding 1, right? So we do n plus equals 1. We also have the plus operators. Thank you, C++. And so there's an n plus plus, and I got plus plus n. While they both increment that variable, they work slightly differently. And the nuance here is that that if you do n plus plus, you actually get the value and use it in your math, and after you've used it in that operation, it then gets incremented. Where if the plus plus n, it says, I'll increment it first, now you can use this after it's been incremented. And here's an example where, oh yeah, let me do the increment and get the value back. It's when I run this in this moment, I get the value of j and it gets incremented. And here I get k incremented and then get the value. So when I simply run these two commands, I'll get the values 1 and 2. But after the operation is over, they're both incremented to the value 2. And a clever way we can make use of this is if they have no variable values to begin with. If I just take a null value or an empty j and a plus plus, I get the value of nothing, which is 0, before I increment it. And or k, I can add the value to it and start with the value 1. So quite often, you'll be looping through things, and you need to start your loop on a 0 or a 1, and this is one way to kind of fudge where your value starts without having a separate operation that says, yeah, sign k equal to 1, and then go use it again in this loop. It's you can start inlining these little things. So, and then if you, yes. Wait, say that again? New line. Do plus $J. Ooh, I did not know that one. So if we do all right, that variable's not defined. Okay, so I get a 0 out of it. It doesn't assign it, and it doesn't change the value of it, though. Okay, cool. Thank you. I'll have to see where I can work that in. Okay, now I'm going to through all my challenges. Where was I using this, right? And yeah. All right, so okay, so we can actually assign values from some of our other conditional or expressions. So one approach here is instead of for each condition, do I assign this value to n? You can actually pull the assignment outside of the if statement and say n equals if 3 or 4. And if you inline it, right, I have n now equals whatever the value it decides to give me out of the if statement. And this brings us to the ternary operator, right? It's new, after PowerShell 5. PowerShell 7, and lets us actually do like an expression, and if it's true, one value, and false, another, with two operators here. So yeah, if A is true or false, it'll then give me the 3 or 4, and this is one that I find myself using quite a bit. Since the code.golf is based on PowerShell 7, we can use the new operators that have been introduced there to shave off quite a few characters. Sometimes we want to fall back on like the old school way of doing ternary. So before we had the operator, there's a clever trick we could do is, if I just have an array of 2 items, I can use my value as like a condition. True or false kind of softly evaluates to 0 and 1 to select the item out of the array. Now, I don't need to do it as often now that I have the ternary, but we can kind of like manipulate that a little bit for more of a urinary single value operation. And the point is that if this is anything other than 0, other than false, there won't be anything for it to select. So so it comes back to like false or 0, it will select the item in the collection, even if it's a collection of 1. And if it's any other value, it will find the 3rd value, which is null, or the 5th value, which is null. So as you're like indexing in to a collection of 1 item, you're only gonna get the item when your value is to false. All right. But I know the strings, these things kind of are collections, if you will. So if I actually try to index into a string, I'm actually get the item in the position 1 instead of the string. So you kind of got to know what kind of data you're working with. But the trick to that is just get it inside of an array. Or you can actually multiply strings as well. So if I take fizz times 0, I'll get an empty string, versus times 1, I'll get the value back. So you can use your 0 and 1 as do I need this or not? And one gotcha to be aware of is that null and empty string aren't actually the same thing. You kind of fudge them in many cases, but there are cases where having an empty string versus having a null makes all the difference in the world in the challenge. All right, so then iterating numbers, right? Very common to work with lists of numbers. The for statement is really weird in that the middle stuff's all optional. Like I can just do a for with the expression, I got like a forever loop with just the for statement. And so like the joke is you always use while 1 for an infinite loop. Well, you can actually do like a forever. You have a forever loop, because I'll always evaluate to, because there is no evaluation in there to check, it loops forever in that case. All right, so then the traditional, like the for each in a collection, all right, and we can do our 1 to 100 looping, but it really boils down to if you just pipe your numbers over into the for each object alias, like that tends to be like the shortest way to loop through a collection of items or numbers. So quite often channels say, yeah, give me the first 100 or first 1,000 of these things. You'll just pipe to your script as the tightest way to get it. So like, 12 characters for that one. Now, you kind of think the filtering very similar, but there's actually some clever tricks you can do instead of using the filter operator. Realize that many of these operators actually work on collections. So in this case, I can actually tighten it even more by saying 1 through 6 greater than 3 will actually filter what's on the left based off of my expression, and it will give me everything that is greater than 3. So you can do this with all the operators. Same like the match, right? If I have a large list of things, I can do just match and give me my expression, and my value out will be everything that matches that expression. So that's even tighter than piping it to a for loop. All right, so I already mentioned they can catch the if statement from the pipeline, but we can do that with the for loop, the for each loop, the switch, like whatever the evaluate evaluates to, it kind of, I say it gets placed on the pipe, and the assignment can catch whatever you're placing on the pipe. So like the for loop here, it'll drop 10 items on the pipeline. It'll be picked up by this variable and assigned to it. What I don't know if I expected it or realized it, but we're always trying to get rid of new lines in our code golf challenges. And sometimes when you put something on a new line, you can use the semicolon, but these statements, the semicolon's actually optional. Like it actually evaluates this as one entire statement, ends it, and then the 5 is the start of a new one. So one, that saves us a new line, but looking at it, it doesn't always do what you think or feel like it should do, right? So especially when you're steering with like other items, like, all right, so you're thinking, okay, so am I gonna get 10 items in this variable? Is the 5 gonna be in the variable or not? In this case, it won't. It's gonna fall into the pipeline to, it'll actually end up in the terminal if I run like, say, this one here. Or it should. Yeah, so this on its own is a valid statement separate from whatever comes next. All right, aliases, right? So use aliases where we can. Outhost has a really handy alias called O. So hello world, O. Oh yeah, 3 characters. There's one challenge where somebody from the community showed me this one. Like I was using the outhost, and like, man, how are you guys shaving off those extra, like, so many characters? Like, oh yeah, alias, I completely forgot about it. Just piping that to OH is the same as outhost. Another fun is like, I don't know, like shadow aliases. It's where, or soft aliases. So any command that's actually like a get command automatically has the soft alias of it without the get dash. So if you type just date, service, or verb, it's going to attempt to find the get verb. So it is like checking your path. And so if you actually have an application that is called verb, right, it will find your exe and run that if it's in your path before it checks for like the get verb. Tiny performance impact. So like don't put that in your scripts, right, your production code, because it's doing that lookup across your path multiple times to determine, if it can call that alias or not. But on the terminal, on the shell, that's just, I've used that one quite a bit as well. And, okay, so I've thrown a whole bunch of these little rules and nuances out at you, and we've touched on a couple different things. I suppose before I jump into the actual challenge itself, any questions on those that we went through? What was that?
Just a comment. You have to be aware by not using get when you're on a Linux box, because some of the commands will be interpreted as the usual Unix command and not the actual PowerShell command.
Ooh. Okay.
I think date was a good example of it.
You're right. Like you're right. There's like when they started shipping on Linux, they stripped out a lot of aliases as well. So like we still kind of get those on our Windows boxes, but remembering that these are running in the code golf, like on Linux, but wherever you're doing your puzzling, right? Okay. So the challenge I picked for today, I'm gonna have this at the top here, is like the Collatz conjecture. So many times use a fairly basic mathematical calculation of some kind, FizzBuzz, Fibonacci, this one here, and they give us the rules. Like, all right, so the way this thing works is you can run this operation repeatedly until you get the value 1. And the operation is, right, if it's even, divide it by 2. If it's odd, multiply it by 3 and add 1. And you repeat this over and over until you get the number 1, because it will either get larger and small, and it'll eventually work its way down. And then the challenge here is, okay, do that, now count how many times you had to like transform this value to get to 1. And we'll do it for the first 1,000 numbers, right? So it's gonna tell us, all right, we're gonna process 1,000 items, each time we're gonna like work through our little algorithm here to see how long it takes us to get to the value 1, and we're gonna output that as the answer. So our output should be 1,000 lines with a count for each one that it took for us to get that value to 1. All right, so I actually let Copilot give me this solution. And all I did was type, actually, I didn't intend to. I typed function colats, and it said, oh, I know what you're doing. And it filled this out. So half the fun is solving these problems, and the other half is like whittling them down to nothing. If you'd rather just whittle them down to nothing, by all means, let the AI do it as long as you like verify it's actually working. It is helpful though to turn like Copilot off as you're working through it, because it starts suggesting things that aren't valid, and the autocomplete gets in your way, and it's and there's times where I let it do it and it looked okay, but when you're getting so tiny and nuanced, you can't even see why it's wrong, and it just doesn't work. So, all right, so here is our algorithm, right? In this case, we got a function, so every number, we can run this once per every number, and we say, all right, we'll do a while loop. While our value is not 1, we do our even condition, our odd condition, and then reassign the value back. Every loop, it kind of does the thing, and we count our steps. Return the steps, and we for each and call it. So now that we have like the code, the structure of it, let's start whittling things down, right? So obviously this is more like you'd write in production. I got the comments, I got very more self-descriptive variable names, and some white space, and those just kind of go right away, right? Like I don't need to know the name of the function is that. N and S are perfectly valid for code golf. Don't do this in production, because at a glance, good variable names are still valuable in production. All right, so I'm already like trimming out the spaces, right? Like my operators, I'm like squeezing them together. This follows the path I took to solve this solution, and I intentionally left some like formatting in place to be easier to see what's happening till much later. So you will see something, oh, why don't you just do this thing real fast? I'm like, well, actually, I thought this was more important to solve now, and this is more important to solve now, but I eventually worked through them all. All right, so my first thing is, you know what, that if statement, quite large. We just learned about the ternary, right? We're gonna have our condition, our true false evaluations. So we take our if statement, we can squeeze it in one line, and then map that over to our ternary. So it's like our condition. If it's even, we'll do this. If it's odd, we'll do that. And these extra parentheses aren't needed. So it's really, there's our question mark, and there's our colon to separate it. It kind of gets hard to know what's happening, but I just kind of know, okay, that's my equation, my algorithm. And when I plug that back in with the if statement, right, now I've got this nice one line to see it. I'm not going to trust my Wi-Fi here, but you can the CodeGolf website, like you can actually make your iterations, paste it in there, or do your work in there, and hit run. It'll execute it, and you'll see if you've got any errors or not. But it also will actually output the results and compare it against the expected results and redline which ones aren't in alignment. So your algorithm might work on all the even ones quite well, and you'll see some of them. So the output is a really good indicator if it's like your pester test, right? Like it'll tell you if you've broken something quite quickly. All right, so here we've gotten down to the ternary operator. We then okay, so I decided this function is not necessary. Like it's cool and all, but like it's really big, right? The function, the parameter, and I'm literally just calling it in this for each loop here. Like it's just a script block, right? So why don't we just put the script block in line and just get rid of all the function pieces? So now I've just whittled down, from 134 characters to 98 just by like, all right, the function's not needed. So I was looking at it, I'm like, okay, well, I remember my for loop, right? It's shorter than the while. So let's put in a for loop in there. So we're gonna replace the while with a for. kind of be equivalent, right? I'm leaving out the other stuff because it's optional, at least for the moment. And these two are, yeah, they're equivalent. So I now got a for loop instead of a while loop to go over the same condition. Excellent. Okay. Now, my eyes are drawn back to this ternary. I'm like, we're doing a lot here to see if something's 0 or not when false is 0, right? It's falsy. So I'm gonna reorder the ternary. So we flip, so when this is even, it was doing the even operation then the odd operation. Well, let's do the opposite condition. Let's say when it's not even, let's do the odd operation and then do the even operation, right? So I flipped the two operations based off of my logic changing. And now because I'm checking for not equals 0, I can actually just do the modulus operation because modulus of value, this only gives you 1 or 0 for even and odd. And now the way we flipped it and simplified our operation, right? We put that inline. Man, I'm happy with this. Man, that feels about as small as I'm probably going to get that. And I kind of it's actually going to hold that way true for a good chunk of this. All right, so the for loop condition, right? Since we're doing these, our logic, right? This not equals 1, not equal. I think I can change that to -1 to kind of get the same effect, what the logic was checking for. So when it's 1 and I subtract 1, I'll get 0, and that's as good of a stopping condition as it not equaling 1. So now it's just -1 in here. Beautiful. And then, all right, so from there, I can actually condense some extra lines into the for loop. So I didn't add them right away because I was just replacing the one thing I was doing with something equivalent. But as I'm looking at this, I'm like, you know what, the first thing I'm doing in here is assigning a value 0. I'm doing a loop, and I'm incrementing. I'm like, well, isn't that basically the definition of what a for loop's for, right? So let me go put those optional things back in there and get rid of the extra new lines. So now my for loop actually looks like a for loop, and I've dropped, 2 lines and from it. All right. So now we can inline it. Take this for loop, right? We get it kind of pretty much on one line. So we delete all the new lines. Now I'm left with my $S, right? And this is here this is outputting the steps, right, after the for loop happens. And this is where I say, you know what? I discovered that, yeah, this guy here, we can just delete him back to the end of the line to be one line. And now I'm done 53 characters on this challenge. In fact, this is actually one of my places I got stuck at. Somebody showed me something I missed in here yesterday morning, and I'll. Yep. That was what somebody. Yeah, a couple people mentioned that. I completely overlooked that one, and I'll bring it back in the end where I discovered to put it back in. So I'll loop back on that one. So this is basically as far as I could get on this approach to this algorithm, if you will. And so in computer science, there's another approach, sometimes when you're looping stuff, there's another approach where maybe you create functions that call themselves. We call it recursion. And it's another type of loop that iterates. And they can be hard to troubleshoot and figure out, but it's basically I need a function that's going to call itself over and over. And the main way you do that is when you write your function, and that's why I decided to use here is recursion. You write your function, immediately create your exit condition so it doesn't loop forever. So it knows how to stop looping. And then inside it, my function C is calling itself on the result of n divided by 2 for our even operation and our 3 times n plus 1 for our odd operation when this is called. So basically it's self-referencing itself, not only in the function itself, but that's actually how I'm starting it to kick off the process. All right, so I kind of whittle away at this one for a bit. And, all right, so all the same tricks we've been doing. We got our ternary. All right, so right away, this if statement right here, I can rework that a bit so it becomes now a ternary with our condition and our two function calls. And now I just have like a single return on that. And now that I've got like a return in like each line here, I think I can remove those just by changing my logic a little bit. So if I just had this as like a if else and just put the values on the pipeline, only one value will be on the pipeline, it'll get the return. So just like I was doing a hard return inside the method here, as long as I'm only providing one value on the output, it's effectively the same thing. So we've removed our returns. And then, okay, but now I'm back to the same problem of like, God, this function is such a big keyword. But a function is really just a script block when you think about it. So let's use a script block. I can call it doing like, dot in the variable name of the script block here. And I kind of repeat that. So I got like here, I'm just basically executing the variable which runs the script. And it's basically, so that's my replacement function call. And then as I'm looking at them, I'm like, this for each, it takes a script block. Like that's the parameter to the for each loop there is a script block. So I don't need a script block to call my script block. I can just swap that for each and just pass it my script block. I do got to get in like the $_ like into the script block now for it to like grab the value and pass it in appropriately. It's not going to auto map it to $n for me. And then as I'm looking at this, all right. So the next thing I said to factor out the ternary. Like this is starting to feel ugly, this ternary. So we reworked it so that this function call, I don't have to do the same function call twice. I can actually pull that out and run it on the results. So now I'm back to my original ternary of like my operation, even and odd, I get a value, and then I can pass that into itself with one function call versus the two. All right, and then the ternary, like we fixed before, like okay, let's clean that up, right, where we like flip the condition and the operator. So we're back down to the n modulus 2 for even odd. We're doing our odd condition and our even condition because that's how the 1 and 0 results kind of give it to us. And let's get it as small as we can get that guy. And I'm looking at them like, oh, you know what? If one ternary was helpful, why don't we use two ternaries? Because I got another if condition here, right? So let's start nesting ternaries. So if you thought your code was getting bad and hard to read, this is how code golf really shines, right? So I've refactored this if else into now a if this value and then else. I kind of got some extra parentheses in here to kind of like see the little pieces of it. But now I have a ternary inside my ternary. And then, my condition, I want to flip that. So I cut off a couple characters there. So I flip that, which means I got to move my other condition. So this makes it even harder to read. But this piece of it here is now hiding in the middle of that piece down there. So this here is the inner ternary nested inside the outer one. Okay, so I got some extra parameters in there, so let's start trimming those off. I kind of removed one in that one and another one in this one. I can't even tell what I'm removing anymore. But I know I got to get onto like this point here. I was down to like one parentheses left that I couldn't take out. And sometimes it's trial and error, like, oh, maybe I don't need these, so I start deleting them, and I find I break stuff, and I work back and forth. But eventually, I tried the permutations of deleting and adding the parentheses to get down to this one set being important, because I got this, I'm adding 1 to whatever happens. Uh-oh. I jumped over something, didn't I? I did. There's a fun trick in here. I got a little bit too fast on. Yep, I got ahead of myself. So the param. Remember this param block? That guy is huge. Let's just get rid of it, right? Like, the reason I'm using the param block is because the way I'm calling it here, I'm passing in the value as the first parameter, the default parameter, and then I'm mapping on my for each here, the value to the $underbar. I'm like, why can't I just call my script this way up here? So as I look at this next line, I flip it. So now I'm taking my result, I'm piping it to my script block, which means I don't need a parameter block anymore. I just do $underbar inside this script. So yeah, so the code's getting so hard to read that I'm even missing my own examples. All right, so now that's why we got to turn away the parentheses. And we get down to this gem here. And this is where, like, when I started the talk, this is where I like tied the leader. Like, okay, it was at 50 for so long, since like 2002. Like that's where the 50 characters were, and like, then I remembered this little trick I said earlier when I say let's assign a value and use it. Well, the first time I used this script block, I can assign it in line and immediately use the value with the parentheses and pass it to the for each. So, bam, there, I set a new record. And then I started this for a long time, and I'm like, God, this space here, I really wish I could get rid of it. I tried and I tried. I'm like, what about this one? Oh, like it felt like it was so required it was there for so long through all my examples that the reason why this works here is because now just the parser knows the parentheses is not a valid character for your variable names. Whereas sadly, you can have something named parentheses, dollar, whatever, and the parser will, don't do that, please, don't ever do that. But in this case, I was able to delete space, right? So there was my next new record. And all right, so I was 2 ahead of the leader. And then I come here tomorrow and like, hey, you know what? They said, oh, I got stuck on the loop at, it was like 52. I'm like, oh, I'm at 53 on that one. Where'd you steal that from? And they go, oh, well, remember those numeric literals? Like there's different ways you can represent numbers, like binary, hex, kilobytes, megabytes, or even scientific notation. So 1 E3 is a little bit less than 1,000, even though it evaluates to the same thing. So my final solution ended up being 47 characters by the help of the community in the 1E3. And I call that out because like a lot of my career is like putting my content out there to help people showing what I know, and all the feedback I get helps me grow and do the next thing. Like any feedback I get on anything I've published has made me a better programmer, a better scripter. And this is just an example of like the community helped me learn a little bit more about code golf, even though I'm up here, teaching everybody else all the other tricks. So I think we're probably at a little bit over time. I do want to do a quick shout out for our sponsors. Like we really appreciate them and the effort they put into making sure this happened. And I've actually worked with a couple of these and the teams from these products and used a couple of these products myself and have had nothing but good things to say about the ones I've used. And with that, don't forget to do the survey. I don't think I got the slide for the link on that one, but everybody appreciates the feedback, and especially with like so many new speakers. Just saying thank you, I appreciate that you did that, it means so much to them. So you don't have to be like critical or say change this, just say, you know what, thank you. And just those thank yous help so much, especially to the new speakers. So with that, like find me at lunch or wherever, we can talk about golf or anything else PowerShell. Thank you.